Good evening and welcome to Brighton Neighbors United Candidates Night. My name is Judy Schwartz and I'm chair of BNU. And it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this important program. Thank you to the Brighton School District for all the help with logistics. In particular, Kim Lansfane, Rose Feltis, Kyle Greger, Paula Van Ryn, Neil, and Paul. Thank you to Catherine Smith of the League of Voters for the important job of moderating, and she'll introduce more formally Sheila Abeling and Mary Husong Callan, the runner and timer. Thank you to Steve Del Monte and Peter Lang from the town for videoing this program. And I didn't find out from Steve, but it's going to be shown on Monday night, the 4th. And I don't know whether we have a time yet, but by the end of the evening, we'll hopefully have a time. And I want to thank the candidates for their participation. This program, as I said, will be shown on cable channel 1303 on the 4th. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Catherine Smith, who will explain how this evening's program will proceed. Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us, Judy. Good evening. I'm most appreciative you're here, not watching the 7th game of the World Series. That is real citizen engagement. We have invited all the candidates in the town of Brighton for supervisor, town council, town clerk, town justice. They have all accepted. One of the candidates is not here. I am going to start. She, of course, is welcome to join us if she comes. I'd like to introduce Mary Husong Callan, who will keep time. The candidates have agreed to a 3-minute opening, and the candidates that do not have opponents will have 3 minutes to give their remarks. They will not be part of the question and answering if they don't have an opponent. Sheila Abeling, who's a volunteer with the League, will hand out index cards, pens for your use this evening. We get most of them back. Sheila gives me the questions. I read all the questions so that there's no issue with the video and the timing and those parts. I do make a judgment call on the questions, but I'm sure I'm not going to need to do that this evening. I might, after a while, if I find they're repetitive, I might choose to skip 2 or 3 of the same issue, and I feel that the candidates have all given the complete answer that they're going to give on it. I might make a judgment call on the repetitiveness of some. The League of Women Voters, as you may know, is a national organization, a state organization, and local. We have 50 units in New York State. We do a lot of moderating of candidates forums. We do a lot of speeches about how elections should be run. Those are our priority issues. And then we do some policy statements. But we do not support parties, and we do not support candidates. We don't endorse candidates. I'd like to very much thank the Brighton Neighborhood Association for inviting us to participate this evening. The first thing we're going to do is have the remarks from the candidates that do not have opponents. So the candidate for town clerk, Daniel. Amen. Not amen. Amen. I was really tempted, Dan. Yeah, I'm wondering what those teams are doing.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Just want to, again, take the beginning. Obviously, we have the other candidates here tonight with the question and answer, so I'm going to defer some of the time to them so you all can participate in this evening. And thank you all for coming, and those of you watching at home, thank you for taking part in our democracy. Just want to thank quickly Judy and BNU for once again putting this on, and the ladies from the League of Women Voters for donating their time tonight as they do so many other days for this. I'd also like to thank the people of Brighton for their support over the last few years. With the support of my staff, I've really been able to greatly improve the level of service that's available in the town clerk's office. From the online payment of dog licenses to expanded payment locations for taxes, to the multitude of forms available on the town website, designed to make conducting your everyday business with the town even easier. My latest initiative that I have started is actually bringing the clerk's office on the road. So I have standing office hours at some senior facilities so that I can go out to there, once a month I head out and, bring my laptop and hang tags and dog licenses and the works. So the folks, our senior residents, save them trips from having to come out, and go right to where they live and be able to help them right where they're living. And it's been a fantastic experiment so far, and the folks have really appreciated it. And I'll be expanding locations in the new year, hopefully with Legacy and Gables coming on board as well. So keep an eye out, for your friends that may be in any of these communities. Keep an eye out in the newsletter for any of the business that they would normally need to come to Town Hall for. And really, I feel like I've brought a new attitude and approach to public service. My staff and I have really strived to make sure that when people come into Town Hall, they're getting the best possible experience and the best service that they can. A lot of times, especially this time of year, people are out there and they're denigrating public service, and I think that's not fair. There's a lot of men and women that work for you as part of the town of Brighton staff. They're good, decent, hardworking people, and really try to support them in any way I can. And that's really part of the role of the clerk's office, is to really help support the board and the rest of town staff any way possible. Again, so I just want to leave the time up to your folks and your questions to them. Certainly later tonight or any time after this, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out and call the office. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. Karen Morris, Town Justice.
Good evening. I'm very honored and grateful to be considered for re-election to the position of Brighton Town Justice. I'm in this race because I care deeply about fairness and justice and about making a difference in the lives of people throughout our community. Courts have the ability to enhance our society in very significant ways. These include providing justice to crime victims and improving the safety of all residents, holding convicted defendants accountable, and turning around the lives of non-violent offenders, people who are starting down a path that leads only to restrictions on their freedom and heartache for victims. Instead, defendants can be redirected to a productive life. I believe rehabilitation is an important component of a sentence. Yes, courts, as I see it, are in the business of changing people's lives. Each court decision should be the product of an impeccably fair procedure in which all sides have an equal opportunity to be heard by an unbiased judge. A judge should never forget that to every plaintiff and defendant who appear in court, their case is the most important case of the entire docket. Through adherence to these principles, I strive to earn the public's trust in our justice system, in our judiciary, and in our town's own court. I am proud to have served in this position for 25 years. I adjudicate approximately 4,000 to 5,000 cases a year, civil and criminal, including domestic violence, assaults, sex crimes, theft, plus town ordinance violations, such as property upkeep issues and aggressive or incessantly barking dogs. Additionally, traffic matters which impact all of our safety are on our dockets. Speeding, texting, cell phone use without a hands-free device, failing to stop for a red light, failing to signal a lane change, failing to wear a seatbelt. Every time we get in a car or when we're out walking or jogging or riding a bike, I want all of us to reach our destination safely. I'm a professor of law at Monroe Community College and the author of textbooks and a treatise for lawyers on New York criminal law. If re-elected, I will continue to strive to transform people's lives, to help ensure the safety of our community, and to achieve justice for all. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Christine Corrido, please correct me.
Corrado.
Corrado. Town Council,
Yes,
2-year term.
2-year term, yes.
Okay.
So I am Christine Corrado. I am currently Brighton Town Council member serving an appointed portion of the 4-year term. I was appointed after the passing of our dear friend and long-serving council member Jim Vogel. And it is an honor and a privilege to be following in his footsteps. But I'm here tonight seeking support of the community so that I can be duly elected to fill out the remaining 2 years of the term. Before I go further, I do have to thank Judy Schwartz for my former Zoning Board of Appeals colleague and mentor. It is all Judy's fault that I have gone down this path, as she was a little voice in my ear saying, do good work for the community, be a good leader. And I do model myself very much on your dedication to the community. Thank you, Judy, and thank you to the League of Women's Voters for moderating this evening. Prior to my appointment to the town board, there are many familiar faces in this room, and many of you know my story, but prior to my appointment to the town board, I served our community as a member of the ZBA, and as a representative of that board, I served on the Envision Brighton 2028 Comprehensive Plan Update Steering Committee. And with thoughtful input from Brightonians of all ages and backgrounds, we compiled a plan for the future of our town, a plan that's interwoven with our shared values of sustainability, education, and diversity. It's our aspirational vision for a community that's welcoming and wonderful, and it's a community that's replete with shared amenities and opportunities for growth. Before my service on citizen boards, my leadership in Brighton began in our wonderful community. Soon after my husband and then infant daughter, now a 13-year-old, moved to the Willow Bend neighborhood in 2007. And we were welcomed very warmly by neighbors even before that for sale sign had been taken down. And that happens throughout all of Brighton. We have a warm and welcoming community. Within months, I was involved with the Neighborhood Association, and I soon became president, served nearly 10 years as leader, communicator, and connector for everyone of all ages in our neighborhood. My career has always been centered on service to others and to community building. I'm a former teacher of Spanish here in the United States and a teacher of English in Spain. I've been a fundraiser for higher education, which is peppered throughout all of Brighton. And I was the executive director of the Greater Rochester Parent Leadership Training Institute. It's a civics engagement organization that builds up parents to become advocates for children and leaders in the Greater Rochester region. So I approach my role in government leadership no differently. In the 15 seconds, my goodness, how do we encapsulate everything that we do in town government? In the short time that I have occupied this seat, I have been engaged with chairing the Public Safety Committee, collaborating with our public safety units to hold motorists accountable for unsafe driving, especially in areas identified by Brighton residents themselves. We're focusing on infrastructure improvements, especially identifying and rectifying inconsistencies in signage, speed limits, and the reach of school zones where our most precious residents walk and bike to and from school. And
Christine, I'm going to ask you to finish the last paragraph.
I will finish my last paragraph. And many of you may have seen the work that we've been doing in collaboration with Reconnect Rochester and Cornell University Design Connect to re-envision Monroe Avenue as a safer, complete street, essentially our main street in the town of Brighton. And I hope to be continuing to do all of that and more as your Brighton Town Council member. Thank you.
Thank you. The candidates on the panel will now have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and make remarks. And I will remind you, if you have questions, if you would write them on index cards. Sheila has index cards and pens, and she'll hand me the questions. The candidates are seated at random order. I did not choose who sat where. So we are going to start with Jason DePoncio. Mr. DePoncio.
Thank you. Good evening, fellow Brighton residents. I'd like to extend my thanks to Brighton Neighbors United for sponsoring this event, to the League of Women Voters for moderating, and to you, the audience, for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and listen to us. I've been serving on the town board since January 1st, 2012, after having been elected in November 2011. Presently, I chair the Finance and Administrative Services Committee, which reviews contracts, bids, budgetary, insurance, capital improvement, and personnel matters. I also serve on the Public Works Committee, which reviews matters of building and planning, highways and sewers, town-owned buildings and property, and public infrastructure within the town. I also serve as Town Board Liaison to the Brighton Memorial Library Board of Trustees, and I previously served as Town Board Liaison to the Envision Brighton 2028 Comprehensive Plan Update Committee. I've always been drawn to community-inspired activities. Prior to serving on the town board, I was also a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and prior to that, I was president of my neighborhood association over in the Meadowbrook neighborhood near 12 Corners. I'm a 24-year practicing attorney. My law practice is based in downtown Rochester. I focus my law practice in two primary areas. The first being in real property tax matters where I represent municipalities. And the second in representing and advising individuals and families in estate planning, estate administration, and elder law matters. I'm a native of the Rochester area, having moved back here in 1996 after obtaining a bachelor's degree in economics from Boston College and a law degree from Albany Law School. I've called Brighton my home for the past 16 years. We as Brighton residents enjoy a high level of services from town government. We have a police force, a public library, and a recreation department that are second to none. Our highway department crews adeptly maintain and repair our roads and sidewalks, and we enjoy services such as leaf and yard debris collection that some of our neighboring communities do not. I am proud of our annual budget process that reviews and funds these services and programs. The process begins in late spring and is passed every year in October, prior to Election Day. And our 2020 budget was passed at last week's town board meeting in accordance with that longstanding practice. The town solicits input from our volunteer citizens budget review task force and sustainability oversight committee, and our 3-year capital improvement plan and yearly operating budget are reviewed by the town board at public meetings and workshops held throughout the summer. We have maintained our high levels of services through careful planning and budgeting while complying with the requirements of New York's property tax cap. Our stellar bond ratings allow favorable terms for long-term financing for major capital projects. I look forward to answering your questions and discussing the issues presented in this year's local elections. I would be honored to earn your vote on Election Day and would be proud to serve another term as one of your town council members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Consul. Mr. Warner.
Thank you. Hi, folks. 8 years ago, I told my law partner that I intended to run for town board. His reaction, do you really want people calling you that their leaves haven't been picked up? And my answer was, yeah, I'd be pleased to do that. I've lived in Brighton for 30 years with my wife, Lissa. We live on Palmerston Road and raised 2 daughters there. I've been a practicing attorney for more than 44 years. But I've given a lifetime of service to my community. My daughter has a seizure disorder, so I became actively involved with the Epilepsy Association, served on its board, ultimately became its president. I love the law, so I've always served with the Bar Association, been very active, and ended as a trustee of the board of directors and of the bar, and I led the ethics, professional performance, and public education committees. Youth soccer, one of my loves, and I coached there for 20 years, first with the House League on the board of directors, where I ran the registration program at a time when we had 1,200 young athletes in that program, and also then became president of the Stormers Travel Club. But most interesting and challenging of all my services have been to the town. For 8 years, I served on the Parks and Recreation Citizens Advisory Board, at a time when we acquired, designed, and developed Meridian Center, Buckland Park, Corbett's Glen, Persimmon Park, Stowell Nature Conservancy. Thank you, Sandy Frankel and Ray Tierney. Now, 8 years almost as a member of Town Council, I've chaired Finance, Community Service, and now serve as Chair of Public Works. And have also served on the Public Safety Committee. I've gotten the hang of it, and I have more to offer, and I'm standing for re-election. But I talk about my service, but that's what town government is all about, is services. It's our primary responsibility to oversee and assure that residents receive the basic services that we join together to obtain. Because local government at its core is simply group purchasing of these basic services in the best, most efficient, and economical manner. And I frankly think we do a great job at a bargain price. But there's more to it than that. Town board gives me an opportunity to lead the community. Something as perhaps mundane as my traffic control box project. That's what those items are, and you've seen them around town. But more importantly, I've been especially pleased to introduce and champion a town ordinance for safe gun storage in Brighton, which requires guns to be secured when not in use, and we are one of the few municipalities in New York State that has this rule to prevent the tragedy of accidental death, injury, teen and adult suicide, and basic theft of weapons, which has been neglected by the state and now addressed in only half measure by our state. I'm proud of what we've accomplished these last 8 years and my part in it, and I look forward to talking more tonight about where we intend to go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Mr. Van Dekker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all attending tonight. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of my biography. You know these guys, you probably don't know me. I was born in Brighton, graduated from Rush Henrietta High School, got a BA in geology from SUNY College in Oneonta, and got a master's in education from the U of R. I taught high school for 30 plus years in the Rochester City School District at the following schools: Young Mothers Program, Franklin High School, Marshall High School, and spent 20 years teaching at Josh Lofton High School, an alternative ed program no longer in existence. I lived in the Virgin Islands for 6 years, from 1978 to 1984, whereupon I returned to Rochester, a married man with a son. Fast forward to 2010 when I retired. For the unabridged bio, I'd like you to visit our Facebook page where it will be posted no later than this Saturday. That's www.facebook.com/Brighton, New York GOP. After I retired from teaching in 2010, I decided to take on some new projects. I've always followed politics and thought that I would get involved in a small way, so I decided to be an election inspector. It's not volunteer work, but believe me, it's pretty close. After my very first stab at it, they said, "Why don't you become a site chair?" This is how they pull you in. Of course, there are perks. Superintendent Moyley brings donuts and apple cider. Be careful about the cider, though. You're there 17 hours. I joined the Brighton Republican Committee, which is a small group of 10 to 15 members, which now meets at my real estate office on Monroe Avenue. After a few years of membership, they asked me if I had ever thought of running. I said, yes, let's talk about it. I spent quite a bit of time thinking it over, and I decided that I wanted to do it, and now I am fully committed. I spent the last couple of months walking the streets of Brighton, knocking on doors, talking to people. I've experienced hugs from old ladies, tongue lashings from citizens disgruntled with our national politics. I've had a flyer or two unceremoniously flung back in my face, and everything in between. But the most common thing that's happened is the friendly conversations I've had with voters from both parties. And what we most often agree on is the need to be able to voice our own opinions and to listen to other people's opinions without talking past one another, even if we end up agreeing to disagree. Civility is absent in our national politics and is beginning to disappear in our local politics. Here's what I hope to accomplish if elected. Listen to citizens' complaints with an open mind and to try to address their concerns. Work hard to make sure that the remaining spaces available in Brighton are put to the highest and best use for the citizens of the town. Make sure that the town board conducts business in an open and transparent manner. Try to improve the services of the town. try to keep taxes from spiraling upward. One more short paragraph. I love this town and I'm proud to live here. On the whole, the quality of life is good, the schools are very good, and the town has a diverse population. I think that the Brighton Town Board has done a reasonably good job, but I do think it lacks true diversity of opinion in its public meetings. One-party rule breeds a lack of transparency. I hope to be a constructive element of change if I am elected. There is room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Magley.
Excuse me. Sneak by you there. No. All right.
Good evening. I'm Bill Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and I also want to start by thanking Judy Schwartz and Brighton Neighbors United. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters, Catherine Smith, but especially I also want to thank all of you that took the time out of your schedules to come tonight. You help ensure that town government remains transparent and responsive to the people of Brighton. I'm in my 8th year of service as Brighton Supervisor. For 18 years before that, I was attorney to the town of Brighton. I've lived in Brighton for over 40 years. My wife, Barbara, is here tonight, and I have 3 adult daughters, Teresa, Catherine, and Marianne. Before becoming supervisor, I practiced law for 32 years. And for nearly 19 of those years, my law practice, my business, was located right here in Brighton. I couldn't be prouder than to live in Brighton and to serve this special community. I'm also proud to have served this community in many other ways, including service as president of the Brighton Chamber of Commerce, the Brighton Rotary Club. I've also been a member of the board of directors of the Alzheimer's Association, like Chris, from a family connection, and the Landmark Society, having grown up in a home that's now almost 200 years old in a small town in Michigan. I'm especially proud to have been recognized by my peers in government. I've served as president of the Monroe County Supervisors Association, and I'm currently a vice president of the New York State Association of Towns. During my 8 years as supervisor, we've accomplished much to enhance the quality of life in Brighton, focused on Brighton's core values of sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and education. We've planned and built 2 multimodal trails, the award-winning Brickyard Trail and the Highland Crossing Trail, which opened just last week. We've acquired over 100 acres of parkland during those 8 years. We've planned for our future as a sustainable community by completing our bicycle pedestrian master plan and our Envision Brighton 2028 comprehensive plan, the first town-wide comprehensive plan in the state focused on sustainability and funded by New York State Sustainability Grant. And in 2020, we will complete our Brighton Climate Action Plan. We've passed legislation protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community, and we're developing a diversity and inclusion plan with a goal of being nationally recognized as a diverse and inclusive community. We've done all this and much more, and still maintain Brighton's fiscal strength. Our Moody's bond rating is AA2, and we've again passed a budget for 2020 that complies with the state tax cap. I look forward to answering your questions and discussing our vision for Brighton's future with you tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The numbers that the candidates have randomly selected will determine which person I start a question with. I then alternate with the second question. The first person that answers it, all candidates have 2 minutes to answer all questions. So I ask when you write your questions that you direct them so that all candidates will be able to answer them, to respond. A couple of things I should have said at the beginning. Phones are off. Thank you. Fire exits are where both exit signs are. You go to door 4 and door 12 out of the building and get as far away from the building as possible, please. And also, just for your information, the only video is by the town, and it's shown it completely. We have very strong feelings that clips should not be used by candidates or particular parties. So the agreement is that the showing is in its entirety. We very much appreciate the town of Brighton doing that for us this evening. Just one other little thing before I start the first question. It's the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. So we've had a wonderful year. We've had more events than we ever have, and we've had a few parties. And next year is the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote, so we have lots of plans for parties next year. So don't hesitate to join in any of those plans. One of the most important things we do is these forums with candidates. I feel, and this is a personal statement, it's a little more difficult today locally to know what your local councils are doing, your school boards are doing, your city council is doing, who the candidates are, even who some of your elected officials are. I'm sure you're all aware of early voting this year. Some of you have probably already voted, and they're very important local races. Also this year, you know that all 29 seats on your county legislature are up for votes. It's very, very important government, and I really appreciate people who choose to come out tonight to be engaged in this process. Thank you. First question goes to Jason. And we're really going to start off with a good one, Jason. This is the first one handed to me, and this is what you're getting. Why has the appearance of the town not kept up with the standards the citizens call for?
Well, I would take issue with one point of that question being that the standards of the town somehow are not up to proper standards. If you look at our public areas, our town hall, our public parks, our 12 Corners Park, I think that they're maintained very well. There is a beautification committee that's been constituted in the town that's reviewing certain public areas, ways to incorporate public art through our communities, throughout our community. With respect to code enforcement, the town has complete control over our own property. However, as far as private property, we have limited control. We can enforce when a violation rises to the level of a code violation. And that's a public-private partnership. We need calls from residents to alert us of problem properties. Oftentimes, there are reasons why a property has fallen in disrepair. Many of them are very heartbreaking, as a matter of fact. But if it does rise to the level of a code violation, we can send a good neighbor letter. Often that produces a very positive result. And if that doesn't produce the result that we'd like to achieve, then we can bring enforcement proceedings in court. But we have limited staff and limited resources. We can't police every single neighborhood and every single street as far as code violations are concerned. So we do require our residents to alert us to issues that are arising with certain properties.
Thank you. Mr. Warner?
I thought Jason put it very well. We do not have unlimited resources, but I also take issue with how Brighton looks. The majority of property in the town is privately owned, and we do the best we can to encourage people and compel them when necessary. One of the great disabilities we have is the recent county attitude and approach that they will not reimburse us the cost of our maintaining these properties when a homeowner does not step up, as they always have in the past, to the point that even if we have to demolish a property, which costs an incredible amount of money, $20,000 is not unusual to have to take down a property, we have to advance that out of a budget that is extremely tight, given the tax cap. The county in the past has always reimbursed us, and then they enforce it against the property in tax foreclosure. That no longer is the case. We've sued, along with the town of Irondequoit, to compel the county to return to the old practice, which is the most efficient, and it's the way governments should cooperate together. And it's absurd that we can't do that today. But things just as basic as well as I believe in hands-on work. I brought this, so therefore I'm going to keep pointing at my traffic control box project. This is to paint over those graffiti-laden traffic control cabinets as well. Some local artists and the kids at the school have helped us with this, has been my project, as well as drafting people, some freshmen out of the U of R to help weed and maintain the property here at Town Hall campus. And also press ganged a bunch of folks out of Clean Sweep to dig dandelions at the 12 Corners Triangle. Yes, it's a community effort. We need to do as much as we can and always more. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Benden?
Yes, I somewhat disagree. One of the issues about private property, when it starts to have grass grow too tall or things like that. In the city, I manage property on Raleigh Street. Tenants are there, they have a lawnmower, they're supposed to cut it. As soon as that hits 10 inches, I get a letter. I have to call the tenants, and sometimes they don't cut it, and then the city comes and cuts it and slaps it on the tax bill. It's tough if you're relying on neighbors to call in, because a lot of neighbors don't want to be the bad guy. They might know someone's struggling or whatever, and they just don't want to, they're uncomfortable making that call. And I think it would help if the town were to be a little more proactive on that and cite people where there are obvious deficiencies in what they're doing, and take it away from the neighbors and just deal directly with the home.
Thank you. Mr. Maley?
Thank you. As I go around town, I walk through our neighborhoods, and overwhelmingly, this is a community where people do take care of their homes, and our streets, our neighborhoods are attractive. But like in any community, there are some exceptions. Jason really did describe the process, and I think we can be proactive. We often are proactive, and we do exactly what Mr. Van Vechten just encouraged us to do. We do send out a good neighbor letter. We want to ensure voluntary cooperation, and when we send a letter out, for example, for a lawn, but it can be a variety of things. We want to let the property owner know, hey, there's a problem here. And 85 to 90% of the time, that letter triggers compliance. When it doesn't, we have no choice but to follow through with the violation, and we pursue it in court. I do want to talk a little bit about a couple particular cases, because development, particularly along Monroe Avenue, often is an opportunity to upgrade a property. Recently, of course, the Otter Lodge on Monroe Avenue closed, and people over the years have commented on the facade of that building. As part of the approval for the new restaurant that's going to go in there, the town required that entire facade be replaced, and it also required a nearby house owned by the same property owner to be upgraded. The house has been upgraded, the facade on that building is going to be upgraded. So it's a never-ending process, it's a hard process. Kudos to our staff for doing that work. But we're gonna keep working as hard as we can to make sure Brighton is a community that does make us all proud.
Thank you. Next question, and Mr. Warner, it starts with you, and we come back around, so Mr. DePonzio will be the last. Do you think taxes are too high? If yes, what would you do about it?
As I said earlier, I think the services in this town are provided at a bargain price. People always talk about at the front door, what do you like about Brighton? The services here, they're terrific, and my taxes are too high. Well, you take a critical look at your tax bill, figuring that this would be a question. I've got my own tax bill right here. Now, out of a total of $15,000 that I pay in taxes for my home, that's a lot of money. I pay town taxes. Look for the town taxes, $1,747. That's $145 a month, my house. The median home in Brighton pays $984 a year for, the $984 a year, which is $82 a month for those basic services: police, roads, snow plowing, recreation, library, and the list goes on. Parks, the recreation program. All of those things are included for $82 a month. As I said, group purchasing of basic services. What am I going to do about taxes? I'm going to keep them this low. Now, at the same time, that $15,000 in taxes, I knew that going in when we moved to Brighton. And we all know why we came here. First, because of our extraordinary schools. Second, the quality of this town as a community. But there's no surprise what the taxes are. I knew that going in. I'm willing to pay them for the quality of services we get.
Mr. Van Vechten?
Taxes. spent a lot of time walking around the neighborhoods. Everybody, you know, some people think that they get great services for the dollar. Other people just, they don't even talk about services, they just talk about taxes being high. We went to a house on East Avenue, a beautiful house, and the guy said his taxes were over $50,000, which was hurting his sale. One of the problems with high taxes, $50,000, and it's not like you've got 20 kids going to school. If you got a fire, it's the same fire department coming. You wonder at some point that affects the sale of homes. And I think in the business we see sometimes people opt to go somewhere else, to another very nice community, but where the taxes are less. I don't know what the answer is, some type of a cap on a certain percentage where you're not discouraging people from adding on or staying in the town. Maybe that's something that overall could be looked at, but would be a long, arduous administrative process to go through. But that's just my feeling. I think it does end up putting a ceiling on values in Brighton that, you know, maybe just because of that, just because of the high taxes. I'm talking about once you get into that $750,000, $1 million range. Okay.
Mr. Maley.
Thank you. Well, you know, taxes are, of course, an important issue, and it's something we talk about a lot. Our budget is developed through a very open and transparent process, far beyond what the town, what the state law would require. We have public hearings, multiple public hearings, workshops on the budget. But I do think it's important to look behind the tax bill and look at the services. We have a police department that is second to none. We have the various services that Chris described, our park system, getting bigger all the time. We also comply with the state tax cap. The state did put a cap on, and it can be a challenge for us as we try to manage the provision of services. I would note, for example, that this year our spending under the budget is up about 1.5%. The consumer price index for last year was up 1.9%, and it's up 1.7% so far this year. So we are at or below the rate of inflation. We're following the tax cap, and we are providing a level of service that I really do think is second to none. So we are going to continue that process, and I want to invite everybody, as we go through the tax and budget review process every year, become involved. We have a budget review task force. They bring business and other community expertise to the table. Our Sustainability Oversight Committee reviews our budget to make sure we're using best practices when it comes to sustainability. And we can't do it alone. We appreciate that help and the help of all the staff that takes the time to put a responsible budget together for us.
Mr. DePonzio.
Yes, I think that my colleagues have stated the tax process and the services that we get rather well. I think what we need to do is we need to take a look at the amount that we pay in town taxes and also look at the services that we get for that money. One example also is refuse districts. I live in a refuse district. My neighborhood went through that process back about maybe 12, 13 years ago, and my tax bill went up because now my garbage removal was on my tax bill. But I no longer had to pay $400 a year for refuse removal. My tax bill only went up by $200 a year. So by adding that to my tax bill, by the power of group buying, my household expenses were actually able to go down. So to say that my taxes went up is really a misnomer, number one. Number two is Brighton is a desirable community. We have a top-notch school district. Our services are exemplary. Our proximity to downtown and to work centers, the U of R, is, I don't think any town is in a better location than we are. For that, people are willing to pay a premium. And what that does is it drives property values up. And last year we went through a revaluation process, and I'm sure people opened up their valuation letters and thought, wow, my assessment went up. But if you look at that assessment, you look at the town tax levy as a whole, we are still constrained by the New York State tax cap, which we were able to do. So by the total valuation of all the real property in the town going up because of the market, that's all market driven, our tax rate actually went down. So you multiply that higher value by the lower tax rate, you're still right in the same ballpark of what you were paying before. So I think what we need to do, just to sum up, is we need to really look at the quality and the value of the services in relation to the amount of our town tax bill, which is the smallest portion of what we pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Van Vechten. What steps are being taken to continue green initiatives to help with climate change?
Well, I'm not a member of the board, so you want me to theoretically, if I were, could you read it again?
Yes, I would say theoretically would be a good way for you to get around that question.
Okay. If I were.
We'll find out if the others are theoretical also.
Okay. I think the sustainability is, the town should be doing that as a matter of course. LED bulbs, I know they do a fair amount of that. There's the free electric hookup courtesy of, I think, the Rotary, is that correct? So I think we're all recycling in terms of all of the details about what has been done and what can be done. Again, I'm not in a position on the government right now, so I can't fully address that, but I know that I've gone online, I've looked, and it seems to be a sort of a regular topic. I know they did not agree to that last resolution, I think at the last board meeting, and I thought the reasons that they did not agree were fairly compelling, and it's an important thing for a community to address, and I think Brighton's doing a reasonable job on that at this point.
Mr. Maley.
Thank you. Not from a theoretical perspective, from a very real world perspective. We have been working, I mentioned earlier, sustainability is what I consider to be one of the three core values of Brighton. I want to talk about two things in particular, and there are many others. First, our comprehensive plan, Envision Brighton 2028. That's a plan that was funded through a state grant, the Cleaner Greener Communities program. And as you go through it, it starts by evaluating current conditions and makes recommendations. And those recommendations are steeped in sustainability. And you can see the ways that by implementing some of those recommendations, many of which we've already begun to implement, we will be able to have a significant improvement in the greenhouse gas emissions, not only from town operations, but from the community as a whole. But I want to talk about a program that will be being implemented in the coming year, and that's community choice aggregation. Community choice aggregation is a plan we're working with the town of Irondequoit, as well as the town and the village of Pittsford on CCA, where we will be able to, we have retained a manager for the plan. Working with that manager, we will purchase 100% renewable electricity for our residents and for our small businesses. By buying in bulk, we expect to get a good price on it. And with that new supply of clean renewable energy, we will dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Brighton. Those are just two examples. I have no doubt Jason and Chris are going to talk about some more, but it is a priority for us. It will continue to be a priority for us. We see it in California. We see it in the superstorms. Climate change is real, and we will not put our head in the sand and ignore it.
Thank you. Mr. DePonzio.
Yes, door after door, conversation after conversation, we see that climate change and sustainability is at top of mind of our residents. And the town has really been a leader in this area when we compare to our neighboring communities. I'm very excited, as Bill has mentioned, about the community choice aggregation program. Our entire town board took a very active role in that process, enacting the enabling legislation back in 2018 and going through the process of hiring a manager to manage that program to bring renewable energy supply to our residents at competitive rates as to the local utility. Secondly, our Sustainability Oversight Committee is a very active committee. I always say that one of our greatest natural resources in Brighton is the talent of our residents. The Sustainability Oversight Committee is a group of very talented, very intelligent individuals whose mind is on best practices towards sustainability. In fact, we mentioned that they review our capital improvement plan to see if there are opportunities where we can incorporate sustainable practices with respect to our major purchases. In fact, next year we will be getting our first hybrid police vehicle. So that's exciting. Finally, the numbers make sense in order to do that. In addition, the Sustainability Oversight Committee also reviews best practices in the development of our climate action plan. That was the third thing that I was trying to think of. The town has received grant funding, and we are in the process of working on that, seeing if we can incorporate different, such as LED streetlights, in order to obtain grant money in order to complete this climate action plan, and that is on our radar, hoping to be completed in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Werner?
Yes, I served for several years as the liaison from the town board with the Sustainability Oversight Committee, and I see Robin Wilt is here. She now serves in that position. It is an extraordinary group of folks. They're very knowledgeable and very committed to global warming reduction. Through their work, we've become a climate-smart community, and are recognized as that, and that's pretty impressive. We've replaced the LED, or the lights in Town Hall with LED bulbs. That was a large project, and that's going to save us some money. If we could now purchase these street lights in our neighborhoods from the Rochester Gas and Electric, we could actually convert those to LED as well. But for some bizarre reason, they have not gone and gotten a tariff from the Public Service Commission for LED lights. Instead, we are only renting them with the current bulbs that they have. We're well beyond time that those should be LED lights. But trails and sidewalks, connectivity has been a major focus of our town board's work. So you can bike and walk to work. You can bike and walk around town. And we've had a creative use of an incentive zoning process that have added these trails and sidewalks along Elmwood Avenue. That is going to be done as part of the project opposite Tops Plaza there. We will now continue the sidewalks along Elmwood. But the Brickyard Trail as well is a great connection. And now the Highland Crossing Trail as well, which we just opened on Friday. Ultimately, the multi-university trail, the multiversity trail, will also be developed and connect our community with our neighboring communities so that we can drive our cars less and save energy and our carbon footprint be minimized.
Thank you. There are 4 questions that seem to go to the same issue. So I'm going to read all 4 of them. And the question begins with Mr. Maley. Do you think town board would benefit from representation of 2 parties? What specifically does a Republican perspective add to the board? This is probably directed toward one of the candidates. Would you be comfortable challenging the opinions of rest of the board on important issues? Can you say no to the supervisor and his team? How do you see transparency improved just by having a board that has both Republican and Democrats? Whichever one you'd like to start with.
I really want to address all of those because I think, and I'll start with the last one. The Brighton Town Board is the most transparent government body in this area. All of our meetings are not only broadcast on cable channel 1303, we live stream them. We have begun ASL sign language interpretation. All of those are ways that we welcome. We have an open forum at the beginning of every meeting. So we have held meetings until past midnight so that we can hear everybody speak. That's important. That's the way government should be. I would hope, by the way, from whatever party, If a town board member has a position different from mine or from one of the others, I don't think anybody on the board is afraid to speak their mind. That's what we need. That's what local government needs. That's what we have seen, and that's what I welcome. In terms of benefit from a second party, if we were not moving the needle on a steady basis and continuing to be transparent, open, reaching out. For example, I look at the senior staff around Town Hall. I have no idea what most of their registrations are, but I certainly know that I have senior staff members who are Republicans, and we benefit from from all of their expertise. But what I see when I look down the table are 4 people who work with me that come from different perspectives, have different opinions, and we have worked well. We've talked about the results. We've talked about the services. We've talked about keeping taxes in check. So I feel very positively about the current composition of our town board.
Mr. DePonzio?
Yes, I mean, I think that Bill said it well. Essentially, we've all talked about the committee process at town board. Oftentimes, people watch the town board meetings or come to our public meetings on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month, or they live stream them on the town's website or watch them on YouTube, and they see the meeting kind of going with, sometimes there might not be a lot of dissension that they see, but what people don't see, but they're invited to come attend our committee meetings. We have our 4 committees: Community Services, Finance and Administrative Services, Public Works, and Public Safety. We meet at various times during the month. There are 2 town board members plus a supervisor and senior staff that attend those meetings. That's where we vet the issues. That's where we're able to ask the hard questions. That's where we're able to test each other's opinions and really come to the conclusion. So by the time it comes to a vote, it's been vetted sometimes maybe only for a couple of weeks, sometimes over a period of several months. So there's a long process that goes before a matter even comes before the town board to vote. As Bill said, everybody comes from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different lines of work, different areas of the country we may have grown up. So we all have different ways of looking at the world. And it's important to bring all those perspectives to the table, regardless of party affiliation. So, I mean, I really think that it's important for a board to work well together and also to have a very open environment where we can express our opinions and we can disagree with one another, but not be disagreeable. And we do that even though we're all from the same party. So really, I don't think having a perspective from another party is really necessary. I think what the voters need to do is look at our track record and then vote based on that.
Thank you. Mr. Warner?
Is there a different philosophy about providing service to our community? Is there a Republican garbage collector or a Democratic one? In the end, we want to get our refuse removed. We want to get our leaves picked up. Now, stereotypically, perhaps, the Republican point of view is less government, less involvement. Does that mean less service? As a Democrat, I believe in truly, how can your government help? What can we do to enhance group purchasing of these basic services? On the local level, I believe there shouldn't be any difference in political perspective. Although I gotta say, when Sandy Frankel recruited me for this position 8 years ago now, I said, Sandy, gosh, well, okay, you know me, anything for community service. I said, but not politics. She looked at me and said, it's politics. I don't believe it has to be, but we have the services that we have because of our group effort as a board, as a community, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Thank you. Mr. Van Dyck?
Let me speak sort of metaphorically. I own a boat with 3 other guys, and we race sailboats. And I think there's 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats on board the boat. And I can assure you, we don't agree on a lot of things, but we're all good friends. We all like each other. We enjoy working towards a common goal. but we have very different viewpoints. I think all of you three gentlemen are similar-minded, and that's fine. And I think the nature of the statistics and the party enrollment is going to dictate that you're probably going to be a majority for a while. Nevertheless, I do think that a different opinion is you know, the antiseptic sunshine of, you know, spotlight. I do think that there should be a little more. I watched some of the meetings on the TV, and I'd like to see a little more. I don't know, a little more passion, a little more difference of opinions. And maybe, as Jason said, maybe some of that's hashed out in the smaller committees. And I'm not expecting like England where they're shouting each other or anything like that, but just generally speaking, you know, we will differ on fundamental aspects of governance, all with the idea of trying to make a better place to live and you know, a vibrant community and a successful community. So you should come on the boat sometimes. It's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DePonzio, we're back to you for the first response. The town of Brighton has started efforts to make Brighton more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. Although disappointingly, the police chief was chosen without much consideration for this. What would you do during your tenure to ensure that Brighton is truly open and welcome to all?
Well, essentially, I'm very proud of the fact that Brighton, with my colleagues on the town board, has started an Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Committee. And again, we drew from our very talented local population, volunteer citizens to volunteer their time on this board, with the first order of business to develop a diversity and equity action plan. The town has hired a consultant. That's underway. My colleague Robin Wilt is the liaison to that particular board to serve to act as the go-between with the town board. The goal is to develop this plan and also review the town's policies and procedures for best practices. I stand by our decision to choose Chief Cathaldi as our next police chief. He started with the department and trained under Chief Henderson. Chief Henderson had a very good tenure with the community, and now Chief Cathaldi cut his teeth with the department as a young officer, and has worked with the department, moving through the ranks as sergeant and then as captain, and now as chief through the years. So I'm very confident that that was the best decision that we made by hiring from within. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Warren?
Chief Henderson gave us the opportunity of a dry run by announcing his retirement about 2 years ago. And we went through a very exhaustive process for his looking at the various candidates for his replacement, and had pretty much finalized our decision when he decided he wouldn't leave the town, much to our benefit. Now he's gone, and we made that same selection with Chief Cataldi.
Thank you.
No.
I'm sorry.
I'm a lawyer, aren't I? We're always looking to diversify our police force, all of the jobs within the town hall. We've been very frustrated with the selection and actual recruitment of candidates that just to have them stolen out from under us by other communities. I think we have a very attractive place to work for a police officer or otherwise in town government, but we make a concerted effort to diversify our police force and all of our community services. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Beckton?
Yeah, and, as being in a biracial marriage with my wife in the back there, one of the reasons we chose Brighton was because of its diversity. We looked at 2 or 3 towns, and we thought Brighton had really a wide range and different diversities and religions and all that, and that's I think one of the most attractive things about the town. As far as the hiring practices, I'm not involved in that, so.
Thank you. Mr. Maley?
I've talked already about inclusion and diversity and how important it is to our community, that I see it as one of our core values, that I see it as one of the strengths of Brighton that really makes us stand out. But even in a community like ours, where we overwhelmingly celebrate diversity in every way. We've been through some tough times these last couple of years. We have had to respond to bomb threats at the JCC. We had to respond when anonymous hate flyers were thrown in people's yards, both in our town and in Pittsburgh. We had to respond when flyers were put up on various places throughout the community. And I think the way not only your government responded, but the way your neighbors, we responded, is indicative of who we are as a community. Hate will not be tolerated in Brighton. That message was sent clearly time after time. You know, I was out at the JCC. The second time the JCC faced that bomb threat, we had just gone through the windstorm. In fact, the JCC was still being used as a warming station for people out of their homes due to the windstorm. I asked the leadership at the JCC, we understand if you don't want people coming back in here as a warming station after this. They said, why would we? Why would we want to exclude people? And they reopened as a warming station. And the first group that came in with food for people who were in that position, out of their homes, no kitchen, was a delegation from the Islamic Center of Rochester on Westfall Road who brought food, who brought refreshments in. That's who we are as a community. It's not something we can coast on, and it's not something we're going to coast on. And that's why I think the work of the Diversity Committee, developing a diversity plan and working with the town on our own best practices in the broad range of diversity, is going to make us a community that others look up to, not just in New York, but around the country.
Thank you. Mr. Warner, the school board consistently says that Brighton schools are underfunded by the state as compared to their peers. How can the town advocate for fair funding from the state?
We're connected with our state government, with our assembly, with our senators, and we have an active relationship. And I think Joe Robach and Joe Morelli at the time did a great job. Apparently, based upon our discussions at the last superintendent's breakfast, that apparently was a one-time shot, and now they got to do it all over again. But to get us the money that this school district needs. All I can say is we have connections with the state government and must continue to lobby them to get the money that we deserve. If our taxes are high, that's why. They're only being paid about 40% of what they're supposed to, which is not even near what the other towns are also receiving at that same deficit, just not as big a deficit in that case. So by all means, we need to do something and as much as we can about that.
Thank you. Mr. Van Beckton.
I'm going to pass on that question.
Okay, Mr. Maley.
Well, Chris is right, and of course now Jamie Romeo is the assemblywoman. I've met several times with Assemblymember Romeo, and always the first item on our agenda is school funding, and I was very pleased when she was able to generate $1 million in new funding, specifically directed at the capital project, that important capital project that the school district is working on. That'll enable the district to reduce the amount of borrowing that they have to do and help keep taxes in the school district in check. The school district is challenged. One of the things we saw even after the second budget vote passed is that a number of clubs in the school have had to shut down because they can't afford the faculty advisors anymore. The Lorax Club, a wonderful group of students that last year planted over 200 trees in the town of Brighton on Arbor Day, no longer has a faculty advisor and no longer exists in the same way we did. So the problem isn't solved. It's a real problem. And it is a problem that the school district, I know, will continue. Dr. McGowan is a leader in the state superintendent's organization. But fundamentally, what has to change is fair funding of school districts. School districts, we can't have Brighton getting only 50% of the foundation aid that it's due. And I am very confident that's increasingly, and thanks to community efforts, the community leaders from the school who are lobbying. They put on a lobbying effort, the likes of which Albany really has never seen, advocating for our schools. We're going to have to keep doing that because the quality of our school district is so important to the community.
Mr. Ponte.
Yes, and actually, we are very fortunate that we have a good working relationship with the Brighton Central School District. Twice a year, the school district hosts community leaders breakfast right here in this room, where members of the town board, as well as members of state government, are invited. The superintendent typically in the fall presents curriculum and new school year type issues, and in the spring presents budgetary issues. That's their budget crunch time. And we are very well aware of the foundation aid formula inequities that are going on with the state of New York. And what we can do is we can work with our partners in government on the state level to advocate for that. And also we can support our local community groups. I know of one, Fight for Brighton, a group of very talented, intelligent, hardworking individuals who are advocating and lobbying our state legislators so that the Brighton Central School District does get its fair share of state foundation aid.
Thank you. Mr. Van Duchten, I'm going to reword this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, it does put you in a difficult position at times, I'm sure. Would you support plans for an open space, especially in areas like Westfall, Witten Road, and I-590? The question asks, what are the plans? But I think if you would just like to talk about that general area and what
You're
plans.
talking about the Gonsenhauser tract, is that?
That I don't know.
Used to be the
Yeah,
Gonzales
okay.
Westfall, Witten, and
Yeah, I mean, I
590.
think the open space is a critical, that's a big factor. You have to take into account, potential revenue for the town, existing zoning, commercial value, trade-off between developing some and dedicating a portion to green space, trails, all of that. And that's, all part and parcel of the whole development thing. I hate to say quid pro quo, it's not a good time to be using that particular Latin term. But there is, when there's development, there's often things to be gained by the community. But again, you have to remember that the community does need a good tax base. So that has to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Maley?
Yes, I do believe, and for me, the purchase of that land, approximately 46 acres, is a priority if we can do it on terms and at a price that don't unduly burden Brighton taxpayers. We have expanded Buckland Park to now approximately 144 acres with the latest acquisition of land at the end of last year. That's our central park. It's a park that is used for active recreation, soccer, lacrosse, softball. It's used for passive recreation, picnics and trail walkers. It is full of nature. If you go back there at dusk or at dawn, you're liable to see deer and turkey and foxes, just as you see in other undeveloped lands around town. It's important that we maintain some of that open space. And so, yes, I will continue to work to purchase that land.
Mr. Ponte?
Yes, as far as the area around Buckland Park, Westfall, and Witten, I'm excited that we were able to acquire the 26-acre parcel immediately adjacent to Buckland Park. In fact, that area was reviewed in the Envision Brighton 2028 Comprehensive Plan Update, and any future town uses of that land, we're going to have to solicit input from the general public. If we keep it for passive recreation areas, that's one thing, but if we look to expand facilities, that's going to be a very major project that's going to require a major buy-in and major support from the community that we're going to have to solicit. So for right now, it's ours. It's great to have that green space and expand that gem of a park that we have over at Buckland. As far as the land over adjacent to 590, it's my understanding that it's currently owned by the Costello family of companies, and that there were some plans back maybe about 10 years ago to put some type of development out there. But I haven't heard anything about that during my tenure on the town board. I believe that that's all been put on a back burner because there are other things that entity needs to address in the near future. But there are no plans that I'm aware of to do any type of development on that property.
Thank you. Mr. Warner.
There are always trade-offs on open space, but they're not making any more of it. In Brighton, we're pretty much built out. We've got some on Town Line Road, also the large parcel there at Wyndham Westfall, which is currently zoned residential. Whether that's realistic that could be developed and what that actually does to our school budget, if that then is filled with families with school-age children, is a whole nother issue. But we are a town of family neighborhoods. We've had some inquiries from various developers, and so far my reaction to them is, nope, that's not it. That's not what I'd like to see there. At the same time, it cost us $1.2 million, as I recall, for the 26 acres, and we've bonded that, and we're now financing that on your tax bills. Do we want to buy twice more what we just purchased and put that much more on people's taxes? And I put that question to people when I staffed the council person on the corner tent at the Brighton Farmers Market. And I've got to say, pretty consistently, people say, I'd be happy to pay it. So I know I am looking quite seriously at it, and I know my partners in government here are looking at that critically, whether that's something we should spend the money to do. The Corporate Lifestyle Center was proposed on the area closest to 590 by the Costello companies. That looked to be an interesting spot to develop some commercial space because it's up against the expressway. So does it all have to be maintained as green space? No. But we're continuing to look at it, and we're always interested.
Mr. Maley, why was the Veterans Memorial Rose Garden on the corner of Seminole and Elmwood allowed to deteriorate, despite promises to the contrary? We now have 2 boulders, 5 shrubs, and a pathway to Town Hall.
The history of that garden was a partnership with the Roselawn Neighborhood Association over 20 years ago. And it was ambitious, and ultimately it was more, the expectation was that the Roselawn neighborhood would maintain a rose garden. Now, I'm not much of a gardenist. I turn to my daughter, the horticulturist, for that. But I do know that roses are tough. Roses are challenging, and certainly it became clear after a couple of years that it was more than realistically could be expected for volunteers from the neighborhood. So the town assumed the maintenance of the garden. And over time, roses are hard. Roses are difficult to maintain. And so we went back out to the neighborhood. We spoke with people. We talked about developing a new sort of garden feature there, a more sustainable garden feature. We budgeted money in this year's budget to develop a plan and then to implement that plan. We were looking for a much more simplistic, much more sustainable model. We do now have, I think, some very distinctive, I don't know if they're granite, slate boulders there with a connection going through it, benches for contemplation, and shrubbery. Over time, we'll see how that garden evolves. Nothing stays forever, and I think it's a new and I think rather attractive look for the town hall campus.
Thank you. Mr. DePoncio.
Yes, just to add to what Bill said, indicated about the garden, is that not only are roses difficult, but in order to have roses thrive, you need to use insecticides, rose dust, which are not consistent with our environmental conscious practice that we try to incorporate on our town property. So that just wasn't a sustainable long-term plan. In the future, I'm looking forward to the development of it. I know that our Clean Sweep volunteers have done a really good job of clearing that out. And I know that we've engaged professionals in order to come up with a sustainable, easily maintained design that's going to be attractive and will be an asset to the town hall property.
Thank you. Mr. Warner?
Well, I'm no gardener, just ask my wife. But I was out there gardening with about a dozen U of R freshmen that I connected with the university to bring out on a busload. And I told them what they were going to do and handed out the work gloves, and they all kind of looked at me. But we were all on our hands and knees pulling out weeds and trying to revitalize those gardens. The way that garden ended up, the design was not sustainable. It needed to be simplified. Now, we talked about open space. Every time I talk about acquiring more open space with Matt Beeman, who's our Commissioner of Parks, he rolls his eyes at me because he's got a total of 7 people in his department, himself included. It's like, oh boy, more land to maintain. A garden like the Rose Garden was and intended to be with active involvement with that neighborhood. Now, if that's put on the town's labor shoulders, that's a huge project that's going to just consume more time than we have. We can't afford to hire more people to do that kind of intensive flower gardening. At the same time, I frankly like the way it looks, knowing what it looked like before and knowing how much it took to just get it back to clean earth. So I'm not offended by it the way it is right now. I'd love to see that be developed, and again, in concert with the Roselawn neighborhood, who seem to have a real active interest in that. Roses, I think, are too much of a challenge in so many ways.
Thank you. Mr. Van Dyck?
Sounds like a thorny issue.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Well said.
I actually used to live 3 doors down from that very park, and Louise and I sort of founded that Roselawn Association. So, right now the town is maintaining it?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And is the Roselawn Association still being consulted or
Yes.
a part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're not actively, financially contributing or maintaining it.
Okay. Okay. So I guess what's the resolution there? I actually walked over it twice, 2 days, no, yesterday. I was canvassing, walking my old neighborhood, meeting some old friends. And I know the grass didn't look too good either. Sort of the grass is kind of a lot of patches and whatnot. So that's something that the town would be able to cure, correct?
Yes, we maintain the lawn.
Okay. Okay. And given that with the green policy, do they seed and fertilize but no weed kill?
We do not use any pesticides
Okay.
or herbicides anywhere on town
Okay.
property other than if there's a public safety. The only instance where we've done it is with giant hogweed, a couple of plants in Corpuscle.
And that includes athletic fields
Yes.
also? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Last question. Why was there an election for town board last year and again this year? It's an expense added to our taxes.
Is that to me?
Yes.
Okay. My recollection is that we did not have a town board election in 2018, but it's a function of state law. Essentially, there are 4 town board members, 2 run for 4. The supervisor runs for 2-year terms. So there are always 2 town board members who run with the supervisor every 2 years. This year, it's Councilmember Werner and my turn. 2 years ago, it was Councilmember Werner and our colleague Jim Vogel's turn to run. So it's every 2 years.
Councilmember Wilt.
Councilmember Wilt. I'm sorry, Councilmember Wilt. Yes. So it was their turn in 2017. It's our turn in 2019. We have Christine running with us to fill the remainder of our colleague Jim Vogel's term this year. That's why there's 3 of us.
Mr. Warner?
I don't know that there's much to add. I don't recall a town board election last year. No, we Christine Corrado was appointed to fill Jim's seat, and now has to run for the balance of his term. So that's why we have 3 town board candidates this cycle. But she'll be back in cycle with Robin in 2 years.
Mr. Van Dyke?
Yeah, that's a special with the 2 running for 4, the 3 of us are running for the 4-year terms, and Christine is running unopposed for the remainder of that 2-year term. And then we'll be back on cycle after that.
Yeah, not much to add, other than that the town clerk and the town supervisor have 2-year terms. So each 2-year cycle, we are on the ballot, and normally 2 town board members and the justice, just to make things even more interesting. But this year, as has been mentioned, our late friend Jim Vogel, Christine is running for the unopposed for the 2-year seat to continue the rest of his term.
I'd like to thank all the candidates for being here. It's a long evening sometimes, and I'm very appreciative of the members of the community who came. Sandy has a few closing remarks. Judy.
I believe, don't we have a?
Well, I'm changing, oh,
They're closing.
that's
you're right.
That's right, when I
Oh,
heard the
yeah.
last question. Thank you, Bill. I will take my seat.
Oh,
Very good.
oh,
Your
okay.
closing remarks.
Okay. 2. We're going to start with you, Mr. DePonzio. Sorry, I didn't put that into the schedule. And I'm changing names and first names, and
You're doing great, by the way.
I just want to
Thank you.
know if, when you get to the ballots, they will be correct.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about the issues facing the town in this year's elections. I'm proud of the recent accomplishments of our town government, and I would like to mention a few of them in closing. Since 2012, we've preserved green space by adding several prime sites to our park and trail system. The Brickyard Trail was completed and dedicated in 2016, providing recreational opportunities for both fitness and nature enthusiasts, literally right in our own backyards. In 2018, we acquired approximately 26 acres of additional land adjacent to Buckland Park, and the Highland Crossing Trail just opened last week, providing a link from Brighton Town Park to downtown Rochester. The Brighton section of this trail is a sight to behold. A permanent home for the Winter Farmers Market is also underway at Buckland Park, to be completed primarily through grants from New York State. I'm also excited to see community choice aggregation coming to fruition in Brighton. Our current town board enacted the enabling legislation for this program in 2018, and in 2019 joined forces with our neighboring communities in Irondequoit and Pittsford to bring renewable energy supply to our residents at competitive pricing. It is our goal to have this program operational in 2020. This will be a key step for local governments to combat climate change and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. I'm proud of our police force, which strives to protect every member of this community through its philosophy of community policing. In 2016, our police department became one of the first in the area to implement the use of body cameras, along with the development of sound policies and procedures regarding their use and the storage of data obtained from them. Town government is also focused on our future. In 2018, the town completed its comprehensive plan update and also constituted a volunteer inclusion, diversity, and equity advisory board with its first order of business to develop an inclusion, diversity, and equity action plan for the town and to also review town policies and practices. In my time on the town board, I've strived to represent the residents of Brighton both energetically and diligently with an open mind and a level head. If reelected, I will continue to use those qualities to serve the members of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
I want to thank Brighton Neighbors United and the League of Women Voters and all you folks that came out here and are watching this at home. I'm proud that Brighton leads the way in so many areas. It's a remarkable and unique community. And I hear this repeatedly in interviews for folks that come in volunteering for our various committees and boards. And I also hear it on the front doorsteps all around town. I also hear it from young people who are so thrilled they're able to find a job in town, in Rochester here, so they can return to Brighton from really exciting cities. And they think coming home makes a better lifetime for themselves and their children. Now, Alyssa and I claim Brighton for our home, for ourselves and our girls, for all these same reasons. And I've worked hard to keep it that way and intend to continue to work to make it so now and into the future. But let's look at what we've accomplished in these last 8 years. Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act, GENDA, was passed in Brighton long before the state even considered it. The Brickyard Trail, 26 acres added to Buckland Park. We've protected Corbett's Glen. Green infrastructure project along Monroe Avenue, where you see the significant change in the look of our Main Street in Brighton. Community choice aggregation, inclusion, diversity, and equity advisory. Beautification committee, climate smart community, winter farm market, Highland Crossing trail, comprehensive plan. All of those things, that's what we're doing now, and we're going forward with even more. Where do I want to go for Brighton? I'd like to see us acquire the streetlight system if we could in the neighborhoods. I'd like to see us continue to evolve the Winters Farm Market into a community center there at Buckland Park. But share your thoughts and even your dreams for Brighton. And together we'll make it even greater. And thank you all for your support.
Thank you. Mr. Van Decken.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to us. It's been a good meeting. Actually, Chris, I've known for a long time. Bill, I've known off and on. He's the cider and donut guy at the East Avenue Fire Department, where I used to be the site chair. And Jason, I've just met tonight for the first time. Very nice gentleman. I get along with everybody. But I do, when talking about diversity, ideological diversity is also important, and they're very fine gentlemen, but they are very like-minded. I think it comes with the party, and I do believe that democracy is most vibrant when you have a two-party system, which we do not have in Brighton. So I think you should think about that, and you know, on the 5th, I'd love to have people's support for that, to at least get and I promise Channel 12 ratings will go up if you get me a seat there, guaranteed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bailey.
I'll add my thanks to everybody that came out tonight. You know, recently, Brighton was named the best place to live in all of New York State. Our vision for the future will ensure that Brighton continues to be a home for people seeking a community that is welcoming to all, and at the same time meeting the challenges of the future. I don't think it's said any better than the vision statement of our new Envision Brighton 2028 comprehensive plan, and I quote from that: "Our commitment to the Brighton community will be to actively promote our sense of community and social equity, preserve and protect our environmental assets, support a vibrant economic climate, and ensure the public health, safety, and welfare for all." That's the vision of our comprehensive plan, and I share that vision. We're working with Pittsford and Irondequoit to establish community choice aggregation, buying 100% renewable energy for our residents. We will continue to look for ways to collaborate with our neighbors to save money and provide important services to our residents. We've acquired over 100 acres of new open space in Brighton since I became supervisor. We will acquire additional space, and we will develop parkland to meet community needs, and we'll do that on terms that do not unduly burden our taxpayers. We'll also develop new trails which bring people together and provide important active transportation links. We've applied for grant funding to design the Multiversity Trail, linking the U of R, RIT, and MCC in a sustainable mini research triangle that will also promote economic vitality in West Brighton. We recognize that the diversity of Brighton is a community asset, and we will continue to support and celebrate our diversity with policies that are inclusive. We did pass local legislation to ensure rights for all members of the LGBTQ community, and we will continue to stand up for that community and others in the face of anyone who would limit their rights. I want to close by saying that every single day, I'm honored to serve as your town supervisor, and I ask you for your vote for re-election on November 5th, or vote early. Vote early every day until the day before the election. Thank you so much for coming.
But only vote once.
Judy Schwartz.
I want to say thank you. A lot of people have said thank you, but I hope that you found this program tonight to be helpful and beneficial to you. And also, thank you to all of the people who made the programs possible, with special thanks, of course, to the candidates, to Catherine Smith for moderating, and Steve Del Monte. It's a hard job. It's a very hard job. And for Steve Del Monte and Peter Lang for their technical expertise. Thank you. And again, as we said, either vote early or be sure to vote on the 5th. And do you have a time yet on the 4th when this, Peter, when this will be? How are we going to find that out? Well, I guess
We'll get it out, Judy, as well. Once we hear, it'll be up on the website. We'll get it out
so
on
go to the
social
town's
media.
website. It will be the 4th for sure, okay? That much I know. So thank you again and good evening.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.